Sometimes the things we're searching for most are hiding in plain sight, in the forgotten corners of small towns, in the innocent smiles of strangers, in a simple cup of sweet tea on a dusty roadside. What would you do if fate placed your greatest loss directly in your path, but neither of you recognized each other? How far would you go to reclaim what was stolen from you? And what happens when the truth is more painful than the not knowing? This is the story of Ethan Carter, a man who had everything, then lost it all in a single day, and of Lily, a little girl who never knew she was lost, until a chance encounter changed both their lives forever. Family isn't just who you grow up with, it's who never stops looking for you. The Carter Building stood 48 stories high in downtown Atlanta, a gleaming monument of glass and steel that caught the morning sun like a beacon. From his corner office on the top floor, Ethan Carter could see the entire city sprawled. Before him, a city he had helped build, one real estate deal at a time. At 45, Ethan Carter had everything a man could want: a fortune worth billions, properties spanning the entire eastern seaboard, a reputation as one of the shrewdest minds in American real estate, everything except what mattered most. If you looked closely at the man behind the mahogany desk, you'd notice the silver threads woven through his dark hair, the permanent crease between his eyebrows, the way his blue eyes seemed to be looking at something far beyond the city skyline. "Mr. Carter?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 9 o'clock is here." Ethan pressed the button without looking. "Send them in. Another day, another deal, another distraction from the empty mansion waiting for him at the end of it." The meeting was about a potential development in a small town in rural Georgia. Boring routine, until a photograph in the presentation caught Ethan's eye. "What's this? Neighborhood?" he asked, interrupting the presenter mid-sentence. "Oh, that's just Willow Creek, sir. It's a small community about 2 hours south, not part of the main proposal, but I want to see it," Ethan said suddenly. The executives exchanged glances. "It's just an old neighborhood, Mr. Carter. Nothing special about it." Ethan stood up, straightening his tie. "Cancel my appointments for the afternoon. I'll drive down there myself." He couldn't explain why. Not to them, not even to himself. But something about that sleepy little town pulled at him like a forgotten memory. As he drove his sleek black Bentley down the highway, away from the Atlanta skyline, Ethan's mind drifted back to that day, 10 years ago, the day his world collapsed. Sarah had been 8 months pregnant when the complications started. They'd rushed to the hospital, but everything happened so fast. The emergency C-section, the whispered conversations between doctors, Sarah's hand, cold and limp in his. "We did everything we could, Mr. Carter," the doctor had said. "I'm sorry about your wife." Grief had crashed over him like a wave, but even through the fog of loss, he'd asked, "And my baby? My daughter?" The doctor's hesitation had lasted only a fraction of a second. "There was an incident in the nursery. Your daughter was taken. The police are already investigating." The manhunt had made national news. The kidnapped newborn of billionaire Ethan Carter. Surveillance footage showed a hooded figure slipping into the maternity ward. Then nothing. Despite the reward money, $10 million, then 20, the trail went cold. After 6 months, the police found a child's blanket with blood matching his daughter's DNA near a river 50 miles from the hospital. The case was, closed. His daughter was presumed dead, but Ethan had never fully believed it. Never stopped looking. Never stopped hoping. Now, 10 years later, he was driving to a random small town because of a strange feeling. A pull he couldn't explain. He almost laughed at himself. Maybe he really was losing his mind, just as the tabloids suggested. The GPS announced his arrival at Willow Creek. It was exactly the kind of place Ethan normally overlooked. A main street with faded storefronts, American flags hanging from porches, children riding bicycles without supervision. He slowed the Bentley, feeling conspicuous among the pickup trucks and family sedans. The development potential here was minimal. He should turn around and head back to Atlanta. That's when he saw her. On the corner of Maple and Pine, under the shade of an old oak tree, sat a small wooden table. Behind it stood a little girl, no more than 10 years old, with blonde hair hastily tied back and a sign written in childish handwriting, "Sweet tea, $1." Ethan pulled over without thinking. Something about her smile tugged at him, bright and hopeful despite the shabby table and the dented metal pitcher. "Hello, mister," she called as he approached. "Would you like some sweet tea? Made it fresh this morning?" "Sure," Ethan said, reaching for his wallet. "I'll take a cup." The girl beamed and carefully poured amber liquid over ice in a plastic cup. She added a lemon slice with the precision of a practiced bartender. "That'll be $1, please." As Ethan handed her a $5 bill, he said, "Keep the change." "Wow, thank you." Her eyes widened, lighting up her entire face. As she reached to take the money, her sleeve pulled back slightly. And that's when Ethan saw it. On the back of her small hand was a birthmark. Not just any birthmark, but one shaped distinctly like a butterfly. Its wings spread as if in flight, with a small distinctive curve on the left wing that made it utterly unique. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs in a rush. The mark was unmistakable. The exact same butterfly birthmark he and Sarah had marveled at during the ultrasound. The doctor had called it remarkably distinctive, unlike any he'd seen before. The same birthmark Ethan had described in excruciating detail in every missing person report he'd filed for 10 years. The mark that had been photographed by the hospital staff the day of the kidnapping. The only physical evidence he had that his daughter had ever existed. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs so hard he thought it might break through. The sounds of the street, passing cars, children playing, birds singing, all faded away. The world narrowed to that single point on her hand, that impossible butterfly that had haunted his dreams for a decade. "What's your name?" he managed to ask, his voice suddenly hoarse. The girl smiled, unaware that her simple answer would change everything. "My name is Lily," she replied, her blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, clear and unguarded. Lily, the name Sarah had chosen before she died. Ethan's hands trembled as he took the cup of tea, spilling a few drops onto the dusty ground. "Are you okay, mister?" Lily asked, concerned. "Yes," he lied. "The tea is delicious." As he walked back to his car on unsteady legs, Ethan knew with absolute certainty his search was over. Against all odds, in this forgotten corner of Georgia, he had found what he'd been looking for. His daughter was alive, and she had no idea who he was. Stories of unexpected reunions can be powerful reminders of how life works in mysterious ways. As we continue with Ethan and Lily's journey, take a moment to reflect on your own connections that seemed guided by something beyond coincidence. The universe has its own timing for bringing people together, and sometimes the most important relationships begin with a simple cup of sweet tea. The next morning found Ethan parked across the street from Lily's tea stand, watching from behind tinted windows as she set up for the day. She arranged her cups in neat stacks, filled her pitcher with fresh tea, and carefully positioned her handwritten sign so passers-by couldn't miss it. So much care for such a simple operation. So much of Sarah in her methodical movements. Ethan had barely slept. After meeting Lily, he'd checked into the local motel rather than returning to Atlanta. He'd spent the night making calls, discreet ones, to his most trusted private investigator, a man who had helped him search for his daughter years ago. "I need everything you can find on a girl named Lily in Willow Creek, Georgia," he'd said. "About 10 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a butterfly birthmark on her right hand. You think you found her?" The investigator's voice had been cautious, having seen Ethan's hopes raised and dashed countless times before. "Just find out everything you can, and be careful. No one can know I'm looking." Now, in the light of day, doubt crept in. Could this really be his daughter? Or was his mind simply seeing what he desperately wanted to see? A school bus rumbled past, and Ethan watched as a group of children approached Lily's stand. Instead of buying tea, they knocked over her pitcher, laughing as tea spilled across the wooden table and onto her shoes. "Loser!" one boy called. "Nobody wants your gross tea anyway." Lily didn't cry. She just silently began cleaning up the mess, her small shoulders slumped. Before Ethan realized what he was doing, he was out of his car and striding across the street. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice cool and controlled despite the anger surging inside him. The children scattered at the sight of him. A tall man in expensive clothes, obviously not from around here. "They do that sometimes," Lily said quietly, sopping up tea with a faded dishcloth. "It's okay." "It's not okay," Ethan said. He hesitated, then added, "Let me help you." Together, they cleaned up the spilled tea. Ethan went to his car and returned, with bottles of water so she could refill her pitcher. "Thank you, mister," Lily said when they finished. "Nobody ever helps me except Grandma May, but her arthritis is bad today." "Grandma May? She and Grandpa Joe took me in when I was a baby," Lily explained. "They're not my real grandparents, but they're the only family I've got." Ethan's heart constricted. "What about your parents?" Lily shrugged, her face a careful blank. "Grandma says they couldn't keep me. That happens sometimes with people." The simple acceptance in her voice made something crack inside Ethan's chest. What had this child been told about her origins? What story had been fed to her to explain away her true identity? "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "I'm in town on business for a while. Maybe I'll stop by for tea again tomorrow." Lily brightened. "I'll save you the best cup." Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan became a regular at Lily's tea stand. He would buy a cup each morning, often purchasing her entire stock so she could go home early. He learned that she lived in a small house at the edge of town with the elderly couple who had raised her, that she was in 4th grade and loved science, that she had trouble with math but worked extra hard at it. Each new detail was a treasure and a torment. These were years of his daughter's life he could never get back. Meanwhile, his investigator had been busy. The initial findings were disturbing. Lily's adoption records were suspiciously sparse. The couple who had adopted her, Joseph and May Winters, had no previous connection to adoption agencies. They had simply appeared one day at the county office with a baby they claimed to have found abandoned. No background checks, no home studies, just a judge's signature on hastily prepared documents. "There's more," the investigator said during their nightly call. The Winters received a significant cash deposit right after the adoption, $50,000 from an offshore account. "They were paid to take her," Ethan said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Looks that way. I'm still tracking down who made the payment." Ethan hung up, bile rising in his throat. Someone had stolen his newborn daughter and arranged for her to disappear into this small town. Someone had paid these people to raise her, far from his reach. But who, and why? The next day, Ethan arrived at Lily's stand to find her struggling with a broken leg on her table. Without a word, he knelt down and examined it. "I think I can fix this," he said. "Do you have any tools at home?" Lily led him to the small, weathered house where she lived. The yard was neat but sparse, with a few hardy flowers clinging to life along the walkway. An old man, Grandpa Joe, Ethan presumed, sat on the porch in a rocking chair, watching their approach with rheumy eyes. "Who's this Lily girl?" he asked, his voice thin with age. "This is Mr. Carter," Lily said. "He's going to fix my table." Grandpa Joe's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "Tools are in the shed out back." As Ethan worked on the table in the backyard, he could feel the old man's eyes on him. Did Joe Winters know who Ethan was? Did he realize that he was helping the father of the child he had taken? Lily sat cross-legged nearby, watching Ethan work with open curiosity. "You're good at fixing things," she observed. "My father taught me," Ethan replied, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. "He said a man should know how to work with his hands, no matter how much money he makes." "Is your father still alive?" "No. He died when I was in college." Lily nodded solemnly. "That's sad. I wonder if my real father is alive." Ethan's hammer missed the nail, nearly striking his thumb. "Do you think about your birth parents often?" he asked carefully. Lily shrugged. "Sometimes. Grandma says they couldn't keep me, but that doesn't mean they didn't love me. I like to think they did. I'm sure they did, Ethan said, his voice rough. Very much. Later that evening, as Ethan sat alone in his motel room, his phone rang with news that changed everything. I found the connection, his investigator said without preamble. The money came from a shell company owned by Victor Mercer. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Victor Mercer, his former business partner. The man who had been pushed out of their company after a bitter dispute just weeks before Sarah's death. There's more, the investigator continued. The night your daughter disappeared from the hospital, Mercer was in Atlanta. I found hotel records. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Mercer had taken his daughter not just to hurt him, but to destroy him, to make him lose everything that mattered. And he had nearly succeeded. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through Ethan. He wanted to confront Mercer immediately, to make him pay for every minute of the past 10 years. But what about Lily? The only parents she knew were complicit in her kidnapping. The life she had known was built on lies. How could he tear that away from her without causing more trauma? Ethan made a decision. Before confronting anyone, he needed proof. Absolute, undeniable proof that Lily was his daughter. The next day, he arrived at Lily's stand with a small gift, a proper sign for her tea business professionally printed with Lily's sweet tea in flowing script. This is too nice, she protested, running her fingers over the laminated surface. You deserve nice things, Ethan said simply. As they set up the new sign together, Ethan casually pulled out a comb that had fallen from her hair. You dropped this, he said, handing it back to her while palming a few strands of blonde hair that had come loose with it. Those strands would provide the DNA he needed for the test. It wasn't how he wanted to do this, but he couldn't risk alerting the Winters before he had proof. 3 agonizing days later, the results arrived via encrypted email. 98% match. Lily was his daughter. The confirmation should have brought relief. Instead, it brought a new wave of anguish. For 10 years, his daughter had been alive, growing up just hours from his home. For 10 years, she had been raised by strangers paid to keep her hidden from him, and Victor Mercer had orchestrated all. But Ethan sat in his car outside Mercer Industries, the gleaming corporate headquarters of his former partner. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. It would be so easy to walk in there and confront Mercer, to expose him for the monster he was, to destroy him the way he had tried to destroy Ethan. But what would that mean for Lily? A media circus, a traumatic revelation. Her entire world upended in an instant. No, there had to be another way. Ethan started the car and drove back to Willow Creek, back to his daughter. The next day, he arrived at Lily's stand as usual, but this time he had a plan. I was thinking, he said as he sipped his tea. This stand is pretty exposed to the elements. What if we built you a proper kiosk? Something with a roof to keep the sun off you. Lily's eyes widened. Really? You'd do that? Of course. We could work on it together this weekend, if your grandparents don't mind. And so it began. Ethan, the billionaire real estate developer, spent his Saturday building a tea kiosk with a 10-year-old girl who had no idea she was his daughter. They measured and sawed and hammered, Lily following his instructions with eager precision. You're a natural, Ethan told her as she carefully aligned 2 boards. My teacher says I'm good with my hands, Lily replied proudly. Maybe I'll be a builder when I grow up. You can be anything you want to be, Ethan said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. He would make sure of it, once she knew the truth, from the porch. Grandpa Joe watched them with suspicious eyes. Twice he had come over to ask pointed questions about Ethan's interest in Lily. The old man was growing wary, and Ethan knew his time was running short. That night, Ethan made a fateful decision. He would confront the Winters with what he knew, but privately, away from Lily. He would give them a chance to tell the truth themselves, to help ease Lily's transition back into his life. It was, he thought, the most merciful approach for everyone involved. He could not have been more wrong. The moment truth emerges can change everything we thought we knew. As Ethan navigates these turbulent waters of revelation, consider the times in your own life when a single discovery shifted your entire perspective. These turning points shape us in profound ways, much like they're now shaping Lily's understanding of who she truly is. The most challenging revelations often lead to our greatest transformations. The Winters house looked different at night. Shadows clung to its weathered siding, and the porch light cast a sickly yellow glow across the front steps. Ethan parked his car down the street and approached on foot, his heart hammering against his ribs. In his pocket was the DNA test result. In his mind, a decade of questions demanding answers. He knocked firmly on the door. After a long moment, it creaked open to reveal May Winters, her gray hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes widening in recognition. "Mr. Carter, it's almost 9 o'clock. I need to speak with you and your husband," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. "It's important. Lily's already asleep. This isn't about asking your permission to see Lily anymore, Mrs. Winters. This is about why she's been living with you for the past 10 years instead of with me, her father." May's face was drained of color. Behind her, Joe appeared in the hallway, his expression hardening as he took in the scene. "You'd better come inside," he said gruffly. "But keep your voice down. The girl doesn't need to hear this." In their small living room, surrounded by faded photographs and secondhand furniture, Ethan laid out what he knew. The suspicious adoption, the payment from Victor Mercer's shell company, the DNA test confirmed Lily was his daughter. "What I don't understand," he concluded, "is why. Why would you participate in kidnapping a newborn from her father?" May's hands trembled in her lap. "We didn't know she was kidnapped. Not at first." "May," Joe cautioned, but she shook her head. "No, Joe, it's time for the truth." She turned to Ethan. 10 years ago, Victor Mercer approached us, said he knew a baby that needed a home, discreetly, no questions asked. We'd tried to adopt through proper channels for years, but were always rejected. Too old, they said. "So you just took a baby? No questions asked?" Ethan's voice rose, despite his effort to control it. "We asked enough to be told her mother had died and her father was unfit," Joe shot back. "Mercer said you were a drug addict who'd likely get yourself killed soon enough. He said he was doing the child a favor." "And you believed him?" Ethan demanded. "We wanted to," May admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But then we saw the news. About your missing daughter. About the reward. We realized what we'd done. So why didn't you come forward? Why keep her hidden?" Joe's jaw clenched. "Mercer threatened us, said he'd make sure we went to prison if we ever tried to return her. Said he'd make it look like we were the kidnappers all along." "We were scared," May whispered. "And by then, we loved her. She was our granddaughter in every way that mattered." "Except she wasn't," Ethan said coldly. "She was my daughter, my flesh and blood, and you kept her from me for 10 years. Joe stood suddenly, his face flushed. "And what kind of father would you have been? A rich man too busy making millions? To raise a child? At least here she's had love. At least here she's been happy." "Happy," Ethan echoed. "I've seen how she lives, selling tea by the roadside while other children mock her, wearing secondhand clothes, thinking she was abandoned by her parents." "We gave her everything we could," May cried. "It wasn't yours to give," Ethan shouted, forgetting his promise to stay quiet. A small voice from the hallway froze them all in place. "Grandma? What's happening?" Lily stood in the doorway, her blonde hair tousled from sleep, her eyes wide with confusion as she looked from her grandparents to Ethan and back again. May reached for her. "Nothing, sweetheart. Mr. Carter was just leaving." "No," Ethan interrupted. "No more lies." He turned to Lily, his anger dissolving into something much more fragile. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." "Ethan, please," May begged. "Not like this." But it was too late. The truth, held back for so long, couldn't be contained anymore. "Lily," Ethan said, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "I'm your father, your real father." Lily stared at him, uncomprehending. "What?" "When you were a baby, you were taken from me. I've been looking for you ever since. And now I've found you." "That's not true," Lily said, backing away, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her eyes darted between the three adults, searching for some hint that this was all a mistake or a cruel joke. "Grandma said my parents couldn't keep me, that they gave me away because they didn't want me." "I never gave you away," Ethan insisted, his voice breaking. "I would never have given you away. You were stolen from me, from the hospital, right after your mother died giving birth to you." Emotions flashed across Lily's face. Confusion, disbelief, hurt, and something else. Something that looked almost like a flicker of recognition, as if some deep, primal part of her had always known something wasn't right with the story she'd been told. Lily's eyes filled with tears, glistening in the dim light of the living room. "You're lying." She turned to her grandparents, seeking denial, but found only guilt in their expressions. "Grandma? Grandpa? Tell him he's wrong." May sobbed quietly. Joe stood silent, his weathered face a mask of conflicted emotions. "See?" Ethan said gently. "They can't deny it because it's true. I have proof, Lily. DNA tests that show you're my daughter." Lily shook her head violently. "I don't care about tests. I don't want to be your daughter. I want to stay here with Grandma and Grandpa." She fled from the room, her small feet pounding up the stairs. May rose to follow her, but Ethan blocked her path. "Haven't you done enough?" he demanded. "Let me talk. To her." "You've done enough damage for one night," Joe snapped. "Get out of our house." For a moment, Ethan considered calling the police, having the Winters arrested on the spot. But the sound of Lily's sobs from upstairs stopped him. Whatever happened next needed to be handled carefully for her sake. "This isn't over," he told them. "I'm not leaving town without my daughter." As he drove back to his motel, Ethan's mind raced. He had found his daughter, confirmed her identity, and confronted her kidnappers. But at what cost? The look of betrayal on Lily's face haunted him. In his rush for justice, had he traumatized her all over again? The next morning, Lily's tea stand remained empty. Ethan waited for hours, but she never appeared. When he drove past the Winters' house, the curtains were drawn, and no one answered his knock. Desperate, he called his lawyer and explained the situation. Within hours, an emergency custody hearing was scheduled. Social services was notified. The machinery of family court began to turn, but Ethan took no satisfaction in it. He had wanted a joyful reunion, not a legal battle that would only cause Lily more pain. 3 days later, as he prepared to enter the courthouse for the preliminary hearing, Ethan received an unexpected visitor in his motel room. Victor Mercer stood in the doorway as immaculately dressed as ever, a cold smile on his face. "I heard you found the girl," he said without preamble. "Congratulations." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "You're going to prison for what you did, Mercer." Mercer laughed. "Am I?" "Think about it, Ethan. A court case means publicity. Publicity means the whole world knowing how easy it was to take your daughter, how you failed to protect her. Is that really what you want Lily to see in the headlines?" "You destroyed my family," Ethan said, his voice shaking with rage. "You took my newborn daughter and gave her to strangers. Why? Because I bought you out of the company? Because I exposed your fraudulent accounting? Because you needed to learn what it feels like to lose everything," Mercer replied simply. "And you did, didn't you? For 10 years, you've been a shell of yourself. Your company runs on autopilot while you chase ghosts." Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Mercer by the collar. "I should kill you right now." "But you won't," Mercer said, unruffled, "because you're still thinking about what's best for Lily. And, deep down, you know that a public court battle with her beloved grandparents, isn't it?" Ethan released him, stepping back. "Get out." "I have a proposition," Mercer continued as if nothing had happened. "Walk away. Leave the girl with the only family she's ever known. In return, I'll double whatever you paid for my shares of the company. You think this is still about money? Everything is about money, Ethan. Or power. Or both. Mercer straightened his jacket. Think it over. If you decide to continue with this custody battle, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man is fighting for that little girl. After Mercer left, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Was he doing the right thing? Lily was happy with the Winters despite their modest circumstances. They had raised her, loved her, been there for every skinned knee and school play. What could he offer her besides wealth and a father she didn't know? As he wrestled with these thoughts, his phone rang. It was his investigator. "They've fled," he said without preamble. "The Winters packed up their car and left town with Lily an hour ago. Local police are looking for them, but they've got a good head start." Ethan's blood ran cold. His daughter was gone. Again. The search took on a desperate quality. Police bulletins, roadblocks, Ethan's private security team combing through traffic camera footage, credit card transactions, anything that might indicate where the Winters had taken Lily. 5 days later, they were found in a small motel outside of Savannah. Joe had used his real ID to check in, a critical mistake. The police surrounded the building and Ethan insisted on being there, waiting in an unmarked car as officers approached the room. What happened next would haunt Ethan's dreams for years to come. As the police neared the door, a commotion erupted inside the room, shouting, a scream. Then Lily burst from the door, running blindly away from the motel, directly into the path of an oncoming bicycle. The collision wasn't serious. The young rider managed to swerve at the last moment, but Lily still fell hard onto the asphalt, crying out in pain and shock. Ethan was out of the car in an instant, racing toward her. Lily looked up, her face streaked with tears and dust, blood trickling from a scrape on her elbow. For one frozen moment, their eyes met across the parking lot. "Dad!" she cried out instinctively, the word tearing from her in a moment of pure, unguarded need. Ethan reached her in seconds, dropping to his knees beside her. "I'm here, Lily. I'm here." He gathered her small body into his arms, feeling her shake, with sobs. Whether she had called out to him or to Joe Winters, it didn't matter. In that moment, she had needed a father, and he was there. Time seemed to stand still as he held her. The sounds of the commotion faded away. The police officers, securing the scene, the onlookers gathering at a distance, May's desperate calls. All Ethan could feel was the weight of his daughter in his arms. All he could hear was her ragged breathing against his chest. All he could think was, she's here, she's safe, she's mine. Something unlocked between them in that moment, as if their bodies remembered what their minds could not. As if the decade of separation melted away in the instinctive comfort of father and child. Ethan's hand moved to cradle the back of her head, just as he had imagined doing when she was born. Lily's fingers clutched at his shirt, holding on with a desperation that spoke of fears too deep for words. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got you, and I'm never letting go again." Around them, police officers led the Winters from their motel room in handcuffs. May was crying, calling Lily's name. Joe's face was set in grim resignation. Lily turned in Ethan's arms, seeing her grandparents being taken away. "No," she cried. "Don't hurt them, they're my grandparents." "They won't be hurt," Ethan promised. "But they broke the law, Lily. They took you away from me. They have to answer for that." Lily pulled back to look at him, her blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, searching his face. "Are you really my father?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Yes," Ethan said, his heart breaking and healing all at once. "I've been looking for you, every day for 10 years, and I finally found you. But why didn't you find me before?" The simple question cut deeper than any accusation. "I tried," Ethan said. "I never stopped trying. But the people who took you hid you very well." Lily considered this, her young mind working to process revelations no child should have to face. "If you're my real dad," she said finally, "what was my mom like?" Ethan swallowed hard. "She was beautiful and kind, and so excited to meet you. She loved you before you were even born." "What was her name?" Sarah. Sarah Elizabeth Carter. And she chose your name, Lily, because it was her favorite flower. Something shifted in Lily's expression then, a recognition of truth that went beyond DNA tests and legal documents. Some deeper part of her recognized the sincerity in Ethan's words, the love behind them. "Can I still see Grandma and Grandpa sometimes?" she asked. "We'll figure something out," Ethan promised, unable to deny her anything in that moment. "But right now we need to get your elbow cleaned up and then we can start getting to know each other, if that's okay with you." Lily nodded slowly, uncertain but no longer afraid. Okay. It was the first step on a long journey, one that would have its share of challenges and setbacks. But in that moment, as Ethan helped his daughter to her feet, he knew they would face it together. The family that had been broken was beginning to heal. Witnessing genuine connection after years of separation touches something deep within us all. This pivotal moment between Ethan and Lily reminds us that even across time and distance, the bonds of family can remain unbroken. If their reunion resonates with you, perhaps you've experienced that rare, precious feeling of finding someone who was always meant to be part of your story. These are the moments that remind us what it truly means to be human. The first weeks were awkward, filled with uncertain silences and careful conversations. Ethan rented a small house in Willow Creek, rather than immediately taking Lily to his mansion in Atlanta. He wanted to ease her transition, to give her time to adjust to the seismic shift in her life. Social services assigned a child psychologist to help Lily process her trauma. The legal system moved forward with charges against the Winters and Victor Mercer, though Ethan was careful to shield Lily from the worst of it. Every night he would sit by her bed as she fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, still amazed that she was real, that she was here. After 10 years of emptiness, he was finally a father. During the day, they would take small steps toward building a relationship. Ethan learned that Lily loved chocolate chip pancakes, but hated eggs, that she was afraid of thunderstorms but loved the rain, that she could spend hours reading adventure books, losing herself in worlds of pirates and explorers. In turn, Lily discovered that her father could draw amazingly detailed buildings on napkins, that he knew the names of all the constellations, that he would listen to her stories with complete attention, as if they were the most important things in the world. But beneath these growing connections lay Lily's grief for the only life she had known. She missed her grandparents, their familiar routines, the small house that had been her home. Some nights Ethan would hear her crying softly into her pillow, and his heart would break all over again. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies emerge in the twilight, Lily asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Will Grandma and Grandpa go to jail?" Ethan chose his words carefully. "They broke some very serious laws, Lily, but they also took good care of you. The judge will consider that when deciding their punishment." "But they didn't kidnap me," Lily insisted. "That was the bad man, Mr. Mercer." "They knew I was looking for you," Ethan explained gently. "They saw the news stories, the rewards I offered, but they kept you hidden anyway." Lily was silent for a long moment, absorbing this difficult truth. "They were afraid," she said finally. "Afraid that if they told, they'd lose me forever." The insight, so clear and straightforward from a child's perspective, hit Ethan like a physical blow. Fear of loss. Wasn't that what had driven all of them? The Winters, afraid of losing the child they had raised. Mercer, afraid of losing his power. Ethan himself, consumed by the fear that his daughter was lost forever. "You're right," he acknowledged. "Fear makes people do things they shouldn't. But that doesn't make those things okay." "I know," Lily said. Then, hesitantly, "Can I write them a letter? Just to let them know I'm okay?" Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Of course. That night, he made a decision that would change the course of everything that followed. In the morning, he called his lawyer. "I want to make a deal," he said. The terms were unusual but clear. In exchange for their full testimony against Victor Mercer, the Winters would receive a reduced sentence, probation instead of prison time. They would have supervised visitation, rights with Lily, under strict conditions. And once they had served their probation, Ethan would help them relocate to a home near wherever he and Lily settled, to remain part of her life. His lawyer thought he was crazy. The prosecutor was skeptical. But Ethan was adamant. "This isn't about punishment anymore," he explained. "It's about healing. About what's best for my daughter." When he told Lily about the arrangement, she launched herself into his arms with such force that he nearly lost his balance. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she cried, hugging him fiercely. It was the first time she had initiated physical affection with him, and Ethan savored it, his arms closing around her small frame as if to memorize the feeling. "They made a terrible mistake," he told her softly. "But they love you, and I can see how much you love them. I don't want to take anything else away from you, Lily. You've lost enough already." As the legal proceedings continued, Victor Mercer was arrested and charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, and a host of financial crimes uncovered during the investigation. The press had a field day with the story. Billionaire's revenge plot, missing heiress found after a decade. But Ethan worked tirelessly to keep Lily's name and image out of the public eye. Meanwhile, father and daughter continued their careful dance of getting to know each other. There were setbacks, days when Lily would withdraw, overwhelmed by the changes in her life. Moments when Ethan would panic, certain he was failing at this most important job. But there were breakthroughs too. Like the afternoon Lily found Sarah's photographs in a box Ethan had brought from Atlanta. "She's beautiful," Lily whispered, tracing her mother's smile with a fingertip. "I have her eyes. And her laugh," Ethan added. "And her kindness." "Tell me about her," Lily said. "Everything." And so Ethan did. He told her how he and Sarah had met in college, how she had studied art history while he pursued business, how she had loved autumn best of all seasons and could name every painting in the Metropolitan Museum's Renaissance collection, how she had decorated the nursery herself, painting a mural of a starry night sky across the ceiling. "She would have been an amazing mother," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "She wanted you so much, Lily. We both did." Lily leaned against him, soaking in these stories of the mother she would never know. "Do you think she can see us now?" "I hope so," Ethan said. "I think she'd be very proud of you." Lily was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can we visit her? Where is she buried?" The question caught Ethan off guard. In 10 years, he had visited Sarah's grave only a handful of times. The pain too raw, the loss too great. "She's in Atlanta," he said finally. "And yes, we can visit her, whenever you want." The trip to Atlanta marked another turning point. Ethan showed Lily the city where she had been born, the company her father had built, the home that awaited her when she was ready. They visited Sarah's grave together, laying white lilies against the marble headstone. "Hello, Mom," Lily said, softly. "It's me, Lily. I'm sorry it took so long for me to visit, but I'm here now." Ethan stood a few steps back, giving her this private moment with the mother she had never known. Watching his daughter speak to Sarah's grave with such natural grace, he felt a strange sense of completion. The circle of loss that had begun in this cemetery a decade ago was closing, replaced by something new and hopeful. As summer turned to fall, Lily started at a new school in Willow Creek. Ethan adjusted his work schedule to be home when she returned each afternoon. They established routines, homework at the kitchen table, cooking dinner together, Friday night movies with outrageous amounts of popcorn. Slowly, tentatively, they were becoming a family. But Ethan hadn't forgotten where it all began. On Lily's 11th birthday, he presented her with a surprise, a proper tea stand professionally built with Lily's sweet tea emblazoned across the front in elegant script. "For when you want to set up shop again," he explained. "The best sweet tea in Georgia shouldn't be kept a secret." Lily ran her hands over the polished wood, her eyes shining. "It's perfect. Can we set it up today?" They placed it at the same corner where Ethan had first found her, under the shade of the old oak tree. Lily prepared the tea just as she always had, while Ethan hung a string of lights to attract customers. By mid-afternoon, a small crowd had gathered, curious locals, a few of Lily's classmates, even the mayor of Willow Creek. Ethan stood back, watching with pride as his daughter handled her business with confident ease. "She's quite the entrepreneur," a familiar voice said beside him. Ethan turned to find Joe Winters looking older and more tired than he had just months ago, but smiling nonetheless. "Mr. Winters," Ethan said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Judge said we could attend the birthday celebration," Joe explained. "May's over there, too nervous to come say hello to you just yet." Ethan spotted May Winters on the edge of the crowd, her eyes fixed on Lily with unmistakable love. "I'm glad you both came," Ethan said, and found that he meant it. "It means a lot to Lily." Joe nodded, his gaze returning to the tea stand. "You've done right by her, better than I expected." Coming from the man who had raised his daughter for 10 years, it was high praise indeed. "I'm still learning," Ethan admitted. "Every day." "That's fatherhood for you," Joe said with a hint of his old gruffness. "Never gets any easier, no matter how long you've been at it." A tentative truce had been established for Lily's sake. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a starting point. As Joe moved away to join his wife, Lily caught sight of them from her tea stand. Her whole face lit up with joy. She waved frantically, beckoning them closer. "Grandma, Grandpa, come try my birthday tea." Ethan watched as the elderly couple approached the stand, their steps hesitant until Lily darted around the counter to embrace them both. The three of them clung together, a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. It was messy and complicated and nothing like the reunion Ethan had imagined all those years ago. But it was real, and in its own imperfect way, it was healing. Later that evening, as the party wound down and the lights of Willow Creek began to twinkle in the gathering dusk, Lily found Ethan sitting alone on a bench near her tea stand. "Best birthday ever," she declared, flopping down beside him with the easy confidence of a child who knows she is loved. "I'm glad," Ethan said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Even better than the year Grandpa Joe built you that treehouse." "Even better than that," Lily confirmed. She leaned against him, comfortable in the silence between them. After a moment, she said, "You know what I wished for when I blew out my candles? You're not supposed to tell, or it won't come true." "I think this one already is coming true," Lily said. "I wish that we could all be a family, not like before, but a new kind of family. You and me and Grandma and Grandpa. Different, but still together." Ethan tightened his arm around her, his heart full to bursting. "That's a pretty big wish." "I know, but you said I could be anything I wanted to be. So I'm going to be the kind of person who makes big wishes come true." In that moment, looking down at his daughter's determined face, Sarah's eyes, his stubborn chin, Ethan knew that she would do exactly that. This extraordinary child, lost and found against impossible odds, would forge her own path forward, and he would be there beside her every step of the way. "I think that's the perfect thing to be," he told her. As night fell over Willow Creek, father and daughter sat together beneath the stars, their shadows merging into one. The tea stand stood silent witness to their quiet conversation, to the small miracle of their reconnection. Family isn't just who you grow up with, Ethan thought. It's who never stops looking for you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's who finds you when you need them most. This story reminds us that family can be complicated, messy, and still beautiful. If Ethan and Lily's journey has touched your heart, leave a comment sharing what family means to you. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, that they're not forgotten, that they're worth searching for, share this video with them. Sometimes the stories that heal us most are the ones we never expected to find. 1 year later, the old neighborhood of Willow Creek was transformed. Where once there had been weathered houses and empty storefronts, now stood a thriving community center, its red brick facade gleaming in the Georgia sun. The sign above the entrance read, "The Lily Carter Foundation for Children." Inside, dozens of children played in bright, open spaces filled with books, art supplies, and comfortable furniture designed to feel like home, rather than an institution. Sunlight streamed through large windows, casting warm patterns across polished wooden floors. The walls were adorned with children's artwork, explosions of color and imagination that spoke of healing and hope. Some of the children were foster children waiting for permanent homes, their futures uncertain but their present made more bearable by this safe haven. Others were from families struggling through difficult times, evictions, illness, unemployment, who found respite and support within these walls. There were children who had experienced trauma, children who had been forgotten or overlooked by systems meant to protect them, children who simply needed someone to see them as worthy of love and attention. All of them found safety here, under the watchful eyes of trained staff who understood that every child deserves to be seen, to be valued, to belong somewhere. Counselors worked in comfortable offices where young hearts could open without fear. Tutors helped with homework in sunny study spaces. Volunteers read stories, played games, and simply listened, offering the precious gift of presence to children starved for connection. In the courtyard, beneath the shade of newly planted trees, stood a tea stand. Not the humble wooden table where it had all begun, but a proper kiosk, professionally built, yet retaining the charm of its predecessor. The sign above it still read Lily Sweet Tea, but now it was followed by the words "Proceeds benefit the Lily Carter Foundation." And behind the counter stood Lily herself, now 12 years old, her blonde hair caught up in a neat ponytail as she carefully poured amber liquid over ice for a line of eager customers. At a nearby table, Ethan sat with a group of business people, explaining his vision for expanding the foundation's work. "We're not just providing a safe space," he told them. "We're creating a model that can be replicated in communities across the country. Every child deserves to be found, whether they're physically lost or just feeling invisible." The past year had changed Ethan as profoundly as it had changed Willow Creek. The relentless pursuit that had defined his existence for a decade had been replaced by a new mission, one that honored both his daughter and the years they had lost. The Lily Carter Foundation had become his passion project, a way to channel his resources and influence into protecting children who might otherwise fall through the cracks of a broken system. Better record keeping, stricter protocols for adoption and foster care, support for families in crisis before children became vulnerable. And Lily, remarkably, had embraced this mission as her own. Too young to understand all the complexities, she nonetheless grasped the essential truth: what had happened to her shouldn't happen to any child. As the meeting concluded and the business people departed with promises of support, Ethan watched his daughter work. She had her mother's easy grace with people, making each customer feel special as she served them. But she had his determination too, evident in the meticulous way she maintained her station and counted her proceeds. "Hey, Dad," she called, catching him watching her. "We broke yesterday's record, $217 for the foundation." "That's amazing, Lil," he replied, his heart swelling with pride. Lily finished serving her last customer, then hung up her apron. "Is it time?" Ethan checked his watch and nodded. "If we leave now, we'll beat the traffic." Together they closed up the tea stand and walked to Ethan's car, no longer the imposing Bentley, but a more modest SUV better suited to their life in Willow Creek. As they drove through town, Lily chattered about school projects and the new girl in her class who had just entered the foster system. "I invited her to come to the center after school tomorrow," she said. "I told her we have the best library and snacks." "That was kind of you," Ethan said. Lily shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She looked lost, like she needed someone to see her. The simple observation, so profound in its empathy, reminded Ethan yet again of how remarkable his daughter was. Despite everything she had endured, or perhaps because of it, Lily possessed an innate ability to recognize pain in others. Their destination was a small house on the outskirts of town. As they pulled into the driveway, the front door opened, to reveal May Winters, her face lighting up at the sight of them. "There you are," she called. "Joe's been watching the clock since noon." Sunday dinners with the Winters had become a tradition over the past year. Initially awkward, fraught with unspoken tensions, they had gradually evolved into something genuinely warm. Not quite forgiveness, but a kind of reconciliation that honored the complicated truth of their shared history. Joe Winters was waiting in the living room, his arthritis worse now, but his mind as sharp as ever. He greeted Lily with a bear hug, and Ethan with a firm handshake. "How's business?" he asked Lily as they settled around the dining table. "We made $217 today," she reported proudly. "That so?" Joe nodded approvingly. "Pretty soon you'll be running your daddy's whole empire." "I'm thinking of expanding," Lily said seriously. "Maybe adding lemonade for the summer." The adults laughed, but Ethan could see the wheels turning in his daughter's head. She wasn't joking. She was planning, always thinking one step ahead. As May served dinner, pot roast with mashed potatoes, Lily's favorite, conversation flowed easily between them. They discussed the foundation's progress, Lily's upcoming science fair, the vegetable garden Joe had started despite his doctor's warnings about overexertion. Watching them together, Ethan marveled at the strange miracle of their situation. These people had been complicit in taking his daughter from him, had raised her as their own for a decade, and yet here they were, breaking bread together, united by their love for the remarkable girl at the center of it all. It hadn't been an easy road. The legal fallout from Victor Mercer's schemes had been messy and public. The criminal trials had exposed ugliness on all sides. There had been days when Ethan wondered if they would ever find their way to this place of tentative peace. But for Lily's sake, they had all made compromises. Ethan had dropped the most serious charges against the Winters in exchange for their testimony against Mercer. The elderly couple had accepted their reduced role in Lily's life with grace, grateful for whatever time they were given. And Lily herself had somehow found room in her heart for all of them, refusing to let the sins of the past poison her present. After dinner, while May and Lily cleared the table, Joe gestured for Ethan to join him on the porch. "Got something for you," the old man said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, worn photograph and handed it to Ethan. It showed Lily at about 4 years old sitting on a porch swing, her face sticky with ice cream and split by a gap-toothed grin. "Thought you might want it," Joe said gruffly. "For your collection, to fill in some of the blanks." Ethan stared at the image, a moment from the years he had missed, preserved in fading color. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Joe nodded, looking out across his small yard rather than at Ethan. "I know what we did was wrong. Keeping her from you. I can't change that." "No," Ethan agreed. "But you loved her. You kept her safe." "We did our best by her," Joe said. "Not always right, but our best." It was as close to an apology as the proud old man would ever come. And somehow, it was enough. Later that evening, as Ethan drove them home through the gathering darkness, Lily was unusually quiet beside him. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded, then hesitated. "Can we stop somewhere first? Before we go home?" "Sure. Where do you want to go?" "The cemetery. I want to visit Mom." Ethan glanced at her, surprised. They visited Sarah's grave regularly, but usually on planned occasions, her birthday, holidays, anniversaries. "Any particular reason?" Lily fidgeted with her seatbelt. "I just want to tell her about today, about the foundation and the tea stand, and everything." Of course, the cemetery was peaceful in the evening light, the marble headstones casting long shadows across the manicured grass. Sarah's grave was in the eastern corner, beneath a willow tree that swayed gently in the breeze. Ethan hung back as Lily approached the headstone. This was their private time, mother and daughter connected across the veil of death by the ties of blood and the stories Ethan had shared. He couldn't hear what Lily said as she knelt by the grave, her lips moving in quiet confidence. But he saw how she placed her small hand on the cold marble, the same hand that bore the butterfly birthmark that had brought them back together. When she returned to him, her eyes were clear and steady. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Yes," she said, slipping her hand into his. "Let's go home." Home was a modest house near the center of Willow Creek, chosen for its proximity to Lily's school and the foundation headquarters, rather than for its luxury. Though Ethan maintained his mansion in Atlanta for business purposes, This was where they lived their real life, in a space filled with Lily's artwork, Sarah's photographs, and the accumulated evidence of their year together. As they settled into their evening routine, Lily completing homework at the kitchen table while Ethan prepared her lunch for the next day, he found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. The past could not be rewritten. The decade they had lost would always be a void, a wound that had healed but left its mark. Victor Mercer would spend the rest of his life in prison for what he had done, but no punishment could restore those missing years. And yet, from that terrible theft had come unexpected gifts, the foundation that was already changing lives. The strange extended family they had created with the Winters. And most miraculous of all, the resilient, compassionate young woman Lily was becoming, shaped by her unique experience in ways that might never have emerged in the sheltered upbringing Ethan had originally envisioned for her. "Dad?" Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he replied, setting aside the sandwich he was wrapping. Do you think things happen for a reason? Like, even bad things?" The question caught him off guard. "That's pretty deep for a school night. What brought this on?" Lily chewed her lip, considering. "The new girl at school, the one I told you about. She said maybe she ended up in foster care so she could help other kids someday, because she'll understand what it's like." Ethan pulled out a chair and sat beside his daughter. "And what do you think about that?" "I don't know," Lily admitted. "It seems wrong to say bad things are good, you know? But also, if what happened to me hadn't happened, we wouldn't have the foundation. We wouldn't be helping all those kids." "That's true," Ethan acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean what happened to you was good or necessary or meant to be." "So you don't think things happen for a reason?" Ethan chose his words carefully, aware of the weight his answer would carry for his daughter's developing worldview. "I think we make meaning out of what happens to us," he said finally. "We decide what our experiences will mean, what they'll lead to. The bad thing that happened to us, being separated for 10 years, that wasn't for any greater purpose. It was just wrong. But what we've done since finding each other, the good we're trying to do with the foundation, that's the meaning we've chosen to create." Lily considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. "So it's not about why things happen, but what we do after they happen?" "Exactly," Ethan said, marveling at her insight. "We can't control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we respond. What we build from the pieces we're given." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I like that better. It means we get to choose." "We do," Ethan agreed. "Every day we choose." After Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat on the back porch, looking up at the stars that speckled the Georgia sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Foundation meetings, school carpools, the ongoing work of building a life together. But for now, in this quiet moment, he allowed himself to feel the full measure of his gratitude. For the daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, for the chance to be her father, however delayed, for the opportunity to create something meaningful from their shared pain. He thought of the girl selling sweet tea by the roadside and the butterfly birthmark that had caught his eye on that fateful day. Such a small thing to change the course of two lives so completely. Family isn't just who you grow up with, he thought again. It's who never stops looking for you. And sometimes it's who you become once you've been found. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not forgotten. That connection is possible even after years of separation. And remember, sometimes the most powerful healing comes from turning our own pain into purpose.